welcome everybody to the AI Powered Woman podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Felicia Newhouse. I'm founder of the AI Powered Woman Conference at MIT. This is where women leaders come to navigate human centered AI with clarity, with purpose, and with care. Each week, we bring together diverse voices you're not going to find on a typical tech podcast, and you'll gain a deeper understanding of how to shape technology responsibly so it advances creativity, connection, and collective well being. So today I'm joined by Dr. Ezgi Canpolat. Welcome, Ezgi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's very nice to have you here, and we're excited to have you next week on stage too at the AI Powered Woman Conference. So
I'm
it's going
really
to be a lot of
excited.
fun. Me too. And so, Ezgi, maybe I should have you introduce yourself and give folks who are listening a bit of a background.
Yeah, I am a anthropologist by training, and I study how society is organized, knowledge, power, social relations, and then I look at how those systems change during big system transitions. One of the big transition I have been focusing on during the last 10 years is climate change and the kind of different transitions in different sectors, particularly energy sector. So I have been using my anthropological toolbox, which
Mhm.
includes ethnographic research that goes beyond just interviewing people, but also living with them, doing participant observation, really try to see the world through their eyes. That toolbox really helps me to understand how they view these big shifts that are going to alter their social, political, economic life. And during the last 2 years, I have been really focusing on AI, both as a kind of a big system transition, as well as the kind of design, the infrastructure and the kind of design decisions made for these AI models, again, from a social lens.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. And yeah, I mean, you have such an interesting background that, especially with AI, where you're able to kind of bridge what we're calling at the conference, anyways, kind of ancestral intelligence, which is just another way of saying our history, our lived experiences, right? Indigenous women as well in these various cultures. And I'd love to hear a bit more just around your personal background of growing up in a
Mhm.
Turkish town, like how has that shaped your views of
Yeah.
community and climate and belonging?
I my personal background shaped my entire career and the things I have been focusing on. I grew up in Turkey. I am from a Kurdish and Alevite community. So Kurdish community is one of the largest ethnic group in the world without a nation state, and they are an ethnic minority. And I'm also part of this religious minority. So, growing up, it was fascinating to really see what types of knowledge gets to be recognized and included, and what types of knowledge do not get the same recognition and therefore excluded. For instance, it was striking for me growing up not being able to speak with my grandmother in our
Mm.
ancestral language, which is Kurdish, because my parents did not teach me Kurdish because they thought that that will kind of marginalize me. So what does it mean? What types of values, the kind of teachings that I got to miss because I was not transmitted this native language through my family? So that really shaped both my scholarly journey, where I focused on belonging, identity, inclusion and exclusion. And then it shaped my work in the climate change space, where I really focused on climate as an issue of social justice, because the impacts of climate change are not shared equally. Some
Mm.
groups experience disproportionate impacts. So then that gets to be also, there's this another layer of the climate action, and then how those policies and interventions then affect certain groups differently. And that also links to my background as growing up in a coal mining community. And I know that this we have to phase out of coal if we want to address climate change, but it really is a transition that includes all this complex social economic dimensions, and we have to carry these communities with us, because if
Yeah.
we leave them behind, then they will be also against climate action, and we don't want that. So
Yeah.
so I have been really focusing on this deep social complex social issues at the heart of our both in the kind of climate space, but also in the AI and other spaces as well.
Yeah. So, could you talk to us a little bit more about AI and climate? You kind of emphasize in a lot of your research and work this people centered approach, which, especially at the conference, this is a lot of the content we're bringing, right? Is, human
Yeah.
centeredness in AI. And that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So, for you and your background, informing this perspective, obviously, how can AI help and not replace the human and cultural elements essential to climate action?
Yeah, so I want to maybe first answer the question without linking to climate, but then I will link it to
Yes.
climate.
Yeah.
So I think when we think about AI models and the kind of values and epistemologies that they are built upon, we see that they generally are built on those dominant Western masculine values, as well as kind techno-scientific values that they then reflect back to the user that is engaging with them, and they have those biases, right? So it's the
Right.
design phase and the kind of intelligence, what counts as an intelligence, and that's
Mm,
a subjective response. I think the critical science studies and technology studies, if they taught us that all the decisions that scientists or software developers make, they are not objective scientific decisions, but they also involve those judgment calls and values that they bring into their whether it's algorithmic design or a scientific solution. So in AI we see it also during users interaction with AI. There has been a lot of discussion recently about how AI's confirmation bias,
mm,
it kind of results in certain tragic consequences, including when people use AI for mental health support as a companion,
yeah.
then they have certain safeguards. But in a long form conversation where there is memory involved, and then because these models are, they have this inherent pleasing kind of embedded in their the way that they function, and they want to please the user and they want to maximize engagement, then in a long form dialogue those safeguards fail. And we recently
Yeah.
saw that a teen committing tragically suicide, and
Yeah.
New York Times ran an article showing how, as the kind of user engage more and more, those safeguards failed. And we see that, so that's a big problem, this confirmation bias, because we then have people again have these algorithmic echo chambers that are similar to
Right.
what we saw in social media. So if you have a climate skeptic go into these models and engage in a way where they ask leading questions and they engage in this long form conversation, then their climate denialism can be confirmed by these models.
Of
So
course. Yeah.
what are we doing there? We are really keeping people in those boxes. And the same thing with, people with toxic masculinity and asking that type of leading question. So we have a
Yeah.
serious problem. Again, that goes back to the concept of the way these models are designed. And the other
Yeah.
side of the issue is how then these models, now we have this technology transforming our employment market, transforming the way that we are being productive at our work, and transforming our ecological footprint. So that's
Yeah.
where climate really then becomes a very important consideration. So I am not in favor of binaries. I don't
Yeah.
see it's AI versus climate, and
Yeah.
doomsday versus just everything is great. I see it as a complex relationship. With
Mhm.
climate, we have those solutions that are incorporating AI to help adaptation becoming more effective. We have this because AI models are really good at analyzing big data. We have ability to analyze large satellite data and come up with better weather predictions. Same thing with mitigation, using AI for better, more energy efficient solutions, using AI to better kind of handle our grid and all
Yeah.
the kind of mathematical calculations involved in there, and the real time decisions that needs to be made with the real time data. So we have those solutions, but we also have the whole question of energy use of these models. Google
Yeah.
recently released that one query, I think it takes like very little energy. It's, I think, around 9 seconds of microwave use or something like that. But
Yeah.
what they did not release was, this was Gemini's usage, but what they did not release was the total amount of energy that
Hmm.
Gemini uses. So we don't have a sense of that total footprint, which is a big concern. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword. And
Can
I am
you
also,
unpack
yeah,
the full footprint for a second for people that may not have followed that? So you have a human being interacting with an LLM generating a prompt, right,
yeah.
with an output. So when you zoom out, right, so there's that, but then there's zooming out to, are you talking about the entire like infrastructure and, systemic aspects of supporting that prompt? Like, is that what you mean by the full footprint?
I mean with the total amount of prompts that Gemini receives on a daily basis and the kind of
Yeah.
total energy used of that.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how many prompts Gemini is responding on a daily basis. Therefore, we don't
Right.
really know the total amount of energy used, let's say, on a daily basis or another measure of Gemini. We only
Yeah.
know what
Right.
one prompt uh, means in terms of energy uses, but it doesn't really give us the full picture. And Gemini, I mean, Google actually tried to be transparent. The other companies, they don't even release that information. So
Mm.
we have a lot
Right.
of unknowns. We don't really know the kind of ecological footprint. And this is not only energy use, it's also about water usage as well.
Yeah.
And we have certain areas, like in the United States, I think it's the London County in Virginia, where those big data centers that are powering these models are located. And all of a sudden, you have that county's energy use go through the roof. And what does it mean for that community, right? Or what does it mean for the grid that's supplying energy to that area? So these are some of the questions that we really don't know answers to. But again, I think discussion is much more complex because there are AI driven applications that are proven to be really important for our climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. So we should not just completely villainize AI,
Right.
as well as ignore these important ecological considerations. I actually see a very parallel things happening with both climate change, climate transitions, and the AI transition. And during our work on energy transition, where we are going to transition out of fossil fuels, we have been using certain principles to guide that work and to make sure that it's just and inclusive. I think similar principles can be applied to AI. And again, those are around who is going to be impacted. So, whose values gets to count, who is being part of those decisions being made during these transitions, and then who will be impacted most and what do they need in order to offset these impacts. How can we make sure the opportunities that will be created are equally accessible to different groups? How can we make sure that certain groups with marginalized identities, they get to be recognized in that process? So those broad principles, and I think we can also talk about what does it mean for women.
Yeah.
They are really helpful to both, I think through these two transitions, because they all happen in an existing context and they can become amplifiers of what already
Exactly.
exists, right? Amplifiers of
Yeah.
bias, amplifiers of inequality and exclusion, if we are not proactively kind of designing and implementing these systems to shape a just and inclusive future.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, there is a lot of talk about AI is biased. AI is a problem, AI is a danger, right? And like you're highlighting, there are very real dangers with the technology where we don't have visibility, especially into the climate impact. But then there's also the piece of any technology at any point in human history that's developed, any tool for that matter, right? Because technology is a tool, is simply just a reflection of us, right?
Mhm.
And of the people who are building it and of the people who are using it, right? So it's very interesting to think about. I think what I'm hearing from you is that a wide variety of people have to be involved in these decisions. A wide variety of these people have to be involved in the policy and understanding the impact and amplifying their voices around that impact, in building these models and having a say into what's actually helpful and what's not, what's dangerous, what's not. So I'd love to hear, I guess, a little bit more from you around what you've talked about before with women. You talked about
Mhm.
marginalized voices. You've
Mhm.
also talked in the past about Indigenous women and local communities.
Mhm.
And I'd love to hear a bit more about, what
Mhm.
that looks like. I mean, how do
Mhm.
we involve, you know, a wide variety of these voices and these technologies? How have you,
Mhm.
specifically looked at the voices of women
Mhm.
and Indigenous women? I'd love to hear more about that because I think the more people understand what
Mhm.
that means and what that looks like and what the benefit of, I think the
Mhm.
more they can understand,
Mhm.
what we're missing and why this is so important to involve a variety of people and
Yeah,
cultures.
I completely agree. I think, and this is something we previously discussed, I think we cannot really afford to just completely demonize AI and just not involved.
Right.
We have to be involved, and we have to make sure diverse group of people are involved. And that will require first improving their AI literacy and skills, making sure that they actually understand what gets into these models, how do they work, and then what are the applications that can improve their conditions and their life. So I think that's it. The whole skills building and literacy is really important, and we see in the for instance, in the climate space, women actually are underrepresented in scientific, technology, and mathematical education, so STEM fields, and therefore we don't have a pipeline of women then to get these green jobs that will be created through the kind of green economy during our transition. So that then reproduces that inequality, and we have to be proactive and intentional about it and really equip women with those skills, and also address some of the stereotypes and norms that prevents them from entering into these fields as educational, during their education in the first place, so that we have that
Yeah,
pipeline.
early in the pipeline.
I
Yeah.
think similar thing applies here with AI. And we know that women's jobs are going to be heavily automated with AI. We know that risk, so we know that women will be impacted disproportionately. So there is that gendered dimension, both with respect to engaging and also the kind of economic and social implications. And then there's this, the first phase of the kind of the models and what they inherently include with respect to
Right.
gendered biases. That's the other side that I mentioned earlier. So, in our work on climate change, we did this study looking at Indigenous women and their knowledges and practices, because Indigenous women, they face this kind of triple discrimination. They are
Mm.
living in the poorest areas, and they are most impacted by the climate change because they depend on natural resources for their livelihoods and for their food security. They, although they are really impacted, they carry this very important knowledges and practices to improve the resilience and adaptive capacity of their communities. So this is around, for instance, Maasai women in Kenya. They have been using plant and animal bioindicators to predict seasonal weather changes, and their
Mm.
predictions were actually more accurate. I think in 2020 they were they predicted drought much more accurate than the satellite data. So they carry, and then they carry these knowledges and practices throughout generations, so they transmit this to next generation, and this knowledge and practice is so important, and they have been adopting it to improve positively the resilience of their communities, but they have not been recognized in the climate discourse. They recently are receiving the recognition that they deserve, right? Because it's so easy to sideline these types of knowledges and practices as non-scientific, as folklore, as whatever. So this kind of very important lived, and the knowledge that really results from the lived realities of these communities, it's now being recognized by IPCC, which is one of the major kind of climate body, and it's producing these reports. And in one of the recent reports, it actually came out and said we should give equal value to those indigenous knowledges and practices. So similar thing when it comes to AI, the kind of general artificial intelligence, right? It really has this notion of there is one intelligence and it's
Right.
going to be generalized and it's universal based on that, science and Western and masculine epistemology, if you like. And that's what we are trying to get to. And critical scholars of AI, they have been talking about plural intelligence. They have been talking about collective intelligence
Right.
and really
Right.
centering human in these discussions so that we have those different sets of important knowledges, values reflected in these models. So I think we can really learn a lot from what happened with the climate science as it relates to indigenous knowledges and practices, and not really fall into the same trap in our discussions of AI. And we saw that in our climate solutions. This is not only the right thing to do, but also it makes the kind of solutions we promote more sustainable, long term, and successful. So
Exactly.
similar thing, I think it can be said for AI. These models, as we incorporate these diverse knowledges and epistemologies, I think they will then attract, or they will have better ways of interacting with these diverse groups of users. So I see a lot of parallels between our journey in the climate space and the journey that's right now happening with AI.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and it's such an important time for us to think about these things because at the end of the day, in some ways, it actually has nothing to do with AI or the technology. It's how we all collectively work with one another and acknowledge the existence of other people, of other voices, of different perspectives, right? So, this really is a human problem at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, what are your thoughts just on, you know, us individuals, right? Because there's these big complex systems and leaders and governments, and so just for you know our average humans that are trying to do the best we can, what is your thought on I
Mhm.
guess tangible steps to get back
Yeah.
in alignment? Because I think the challenge is when I know for myself and especially
Mhm.
for other people and women that I've talked to, we feel these things so deeply. We feel these challenges, for humanity right now, there's so many of them. Um, and the climate, especially, is very overwhelming, and the responsible use of AI. So, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts for those listening? What can they do, even if
Mhm.
they're small steps? Any insights you
Yeah.
have on that?
Yeah. I think so. I'm a little bit skeptical about like individualized solutions when it comes to
Mm,
climate change, because some of these issues, they really require systemic response. But of course, as individuals, we can do what we can. But I think I find it when it becomes a kind of accusations, or when it is weaponized to
mm,
vilify people, I don't necessarily agree with that. If you want to reduce your carbon footprint and you are making conscious decisions towards that, that's great. But then we that doesn't really mean that we should ignore the systemic level changes that's actually going to be needed in order for us to address climate change. In the case of I have become really fascinated in the whole discussions around confirmation bias. I think
yeah.
that the whole the carbon footprint discussions. There are different strategies we can use. We can reflect on whether what we are using AI, is it really needed? Just becoming
Right.
aware of
Right.
the carbon footprint of every prompt that we are feeding into these models,
It's
and
a broader
reflecting.
mindset for your whole life, right? No matter what you're
Exactly.
doing, using and consuming, right?
Yes, being intentional and being
Yeah.
conscious around
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these are different. Like, I am not a native speaker, and I have all my life I have faced, during my PhD, my articles were not just perfect English. They always had some issues that the professor highlighted as, just, this is not clear. So I kind of I was in this unequal playing field. And
Yeah.
now, if a student who doesn't, whose language English is not their native language, if they are using to proofread their paper, they should, because it's leveling the playing field for them.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so it's different, right? Like, certain decisions, they will look different for basically based on the person. um, and the whole confirmation bias part, I think that's where AI literacy and understanding how these models operate will become really, really important.
Mm,
Because, as we saw in these tragic cases, the whole personalization, attributing that personality to AI, and just personifying AI. And this is not person's fault. This is the way that these models are trained to operate. They train to come across as empathetic. They train to come
mm,
across as this companion. And
right,
in a
right.
in a situation of crisis, if this is the tool you turn to, and this
Mm,
is the tool you are asking questions, and then in a kind of a longer conversation, all the safeguards fail, and then your worst instincts get confirmed by the model, this
right,
is a
right.
problem. And
It's
this
taking
is
agency away, right? So then you
exactly.
essentially have an entire generation of humans that are relying on something for the answers without critical thinking and building those critical thinking skills. But you have that confirmation bias baked in, so it also leaves room for weaponization of it as well.
Exactly. And these models are not, because of their reinforcement training, they are not good at challenging people. They are
Right.
good at policing, they are good at
Yeah.
confirming, but not challenging. And what we need, in certain cases, people to be challenged. And
Right.
so that gets really complicated. Like, if we have people with certain biases, stereotypes going into these models, and we are also, I mean, in the United States, there's epidemic of loneliness. We know people are less social. So if this is what they are turning into, and their worst biases gets confirmed, then we are contributing to deeper and deeper polarization. So that, it
Yeah.
really concerns me, and that's something that I think we need to address. And now there are these lawsuits being filed around that issue. So I think there's a significant reckoning happening around that.
So
But we
awareness and
exactly,
education around
exactly,
what are we using and what are we creating dependencies on and how are we training our own brains, right? Because even as adults, our brains are growing, never mind for our children that are going to be using these models, right? So we do have to be very conscious of how we're rewiring our brains with knowledge. Because really, at the end of the day, it comes down to how are we shaping knowledge for our species, right? And so we're essentially outsourcing you know,
exactly.
knowledge to this whole realm.
And the cognitive development, like how it impacts, I mean, there's a huge discussion, the cognitive development of children or younger
Yeah,
adults. It's a big, again, a lot of questions. And parents, they don't know about these impacts necessarily. So, like,
exactly.
we need to educate parents, we need to
Yep,
educate children. So, like, there is all that AI education that needs to be happening, all
exactly.
that AI literacy, skills building, and less of, let's just completely ignore. Oh, I asked ChatGPT this and it doesn't give me a good response. It's not working. Well, it's pretty much incorporated in every aspect of our lives now. So I think
Yeah,
warrants further reflection. And I think this conference that you are putting together really creates that space to have that reflection and
yeah,
really have that intentionality. Uh, People from coming from different parts of the puzzle, which
exactly.
is exactly what we should be doing. And I think same thing for the AI and climate discussion. It is
Yeah,
here already, and let's just think about how to reduce its carbon footprint, how to use AI for climate solutions. So let's have this. Genie is out of the box. We are not going to put it back in the
exactly.
box. So how
Exactly.
we govern it, the ethics of AI, energy of AI usage, all these discussions. I think we need spaces, and we
Yeah.
need spaces where diverse voices could be present to have
Right.
these decisions, and which will essentially shape our future.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, to challenge, the decisions being made right now. We need people who are critical thinkers that are, yeah, going to this conference, going into these rooms, and they're asking tough questions because they were exposed to other diverse thought and
Mhm.
thinkers that are bringing these various perspectives in, that are waking up in them. Hey, wait, this is a different way to think about this, right? And I think that cross pollination of knowledge
Mhm.
is the only way we're going to get through this and shape the trajectory in a way that's a bit more positive than the direction it's going right now, right? So it's really about
Exactly.
transparency first and foremost, right? We need
Mhm.
transparency into these models, and then we need to be able to cross pollinate the knowledge and the discussions, because everyone's going to have a different, angle on this and perspective, and so we need all those voices in the room. So
Exactly.
lots of
And
dialogue right now.
same thing, similar approach is also the most effective approach when it comes to climate change. You can't address
Yes,
climate change by only engaging with one sector and one sector specialist. You have to involve all sectors, from agriculture to energy to transport. You have to have these different disciplines together because it's a system change, similar to AI. It's
exactly.
a big systems change that
Yeah,
require us to reflect at a political, societal, economic, and individual level. So
correct.
that cross pollination and that interdisciplinary, and diverse, inclusive spaces is, I think, critical.
Yeah, exactly. I always say, like, you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And we all need each other to reveal those blind spots. So that's how positive change happens. So thank
Exactly.
you for being here, Ezgi. It was lovely
Thank
talking to
you.
you.
Thank you for
And
having
I'm so
me.
excited to have you with us next week. It's going to be an awesome conversation to open up around this topic as well, because it's very timely. It's on people's heads and hearts, and we all want to figure this out together. So
Exactly. I'm really looking forward to it.
yes. Well, for everybody out there listening, thank you for being here. And if today's conversation, really gave you something to think about, just subscribe, listen to more of our podcast. Make sure you follow Ezgi and her work as well. There's so much to learn from her and so much wisdom. And so please just, keep this conversation going. And remember, the way to shape the future isn't by doing it all alone, it's by leading together. Thank you, everybody.